what were the conversations like, so was it like very formal, informal, or did you start,
It was fairly informal. We normally had one person from the MDM and one person from business presenting a view. Not so much on politics, but politics always came back, obviously. And interesting, we coined a phrase which is today used everywhere, and that a country has a political economy. And that was a foreign concept for the business people. Yes. You can imagine business, and then you say it's a political economy. But I think over time, so business would present, say, we need a market and we need to give jobs and we need to grow. I mean, we almost hear it today the same. And then, if it, depending on who it was, but normally it would be, but we need a socialist structure. And remember, the ANC also moved, the whole MDM moved, because at the time, very much socialistic, and we must provide, and the state must provide, etc., etc. And over time, they found each other. I remember one specific incident when we did get ZAPU in, and I think John Hall of Barlow's did a fairly straightforward thing about the economy and politics and so on. And ZAPU then came with a highly ideological thing. And at some point, John Hall just banged the table and said, "I can't take any more of this." And he walked out. I mean, even before we normally would suspect the walkout. And then we had to bring him in, and we had to say, "No, but listen them out, and we'll talk about the differences later." So I think there was a lot of energy, obviously. And look, we romanticize it when we look back, but there was also a lot of anger, obviously, and despair, especially on the side of the MDM. So that was the sort of first process. In the meantime, we had individual meetings with individual ministers from the National Party, in which we informed them, this is what we're doing.
Were they eager to listen?
Some of them were. We didn't try to meet with someone like P.W. Botha, for instance, but Ernest Kriel we met with, Rolf Meyer, Tertius Delport, sort of call it the enlightened guys in the National Party, Baron du Plessis. And so we moved then towards establishing regions. So we had a PWV region, which is now Gauteng, the Pretoria Witwatersrand Vereniging area. We had a Natal region, Eastern Cape region and a Western Cape region with small offices. And that then became the focus point of our offices meeting with the people in that region. Now obviously that took us about 18 months, because what then happened is, while we were still busy here, FW de Klerk came and out of the blue, so to speak, announced that we were going to unban the ANC and release
So were you not expecting that?
No one was.
Really?
I remember I was in London with a conference with people like Aziz Pahad and others. And I often joke with them when they say, "No, look, FW had to hand over, he had no choice." I said, "I remember you guys, you were as surprised as I was when we saw on television that FW de Klerk, you didn't know what to do, because they didn't expect it." So it was, I don't think anyone expected it. And it's also true that quite a number of people in his own party didn't expect it, But that changed the whole game. And obviously what that made us do is, because there was some time before, after the unbanning, before the ANC came back, where they were still in Zambia and so on, and we organized, I think, 2 delegations during that time before they came back to go and talk to them around those same principles, because at the time we'd only spoken to the MDM, the UDF, COSATU and so on, and we want to speak to the ANC too. The other thing that helped a little bit was the Dakar Safari that I spoke about earlier, where I wasn't part of CBM yet, I was still a Minister of Religion, but Christian Nel was busy prepping, the whole foundation of CBM. I met him there, and obviously when I got back and he knew and we knew each other, we could then, when the ANC people that we met there came back, there was a point of contact with them, and that helped, I think, the CBM, because both of us had met with some of the ANC leadership there.
I'm just fascinated by the fact that you said of these 40 individuals who came together to form the CBM, they didn't come in as representing their particular companies, and they were individuals, but they came in with a particular business mind or a business ideology and agenda, isn't it? So it's still revolving around the whole concept of how you would make South Africa sustainable through this transition process. So they were driven by that business etiquette.
Yeah. Look, and I think it's fair to say that some of them probably told their board, look, I'm involved in a process, but it's sort of hush hush, I can't tell you more, but please take note. Others, I would imagine, and I know that you spoke to Mike Spicer too, I think others were sent by their companies to check up on CBM. You know? And we always joked that we thought that Mike Spicer was, we called him Cardinal Richelieu, because we thought he was coming to check up on us, which was fine because Anglo was there and Anglo was a big player. But I'm sure that Anglo's board didn't vet him and say, you know, Mike, go and represent us. But some companies therefore knew more and supported it silently. But the government, let's say PW would have found out about this, he could never have called in someone and say, I hear you, your CEO is there. There was a bit of a distance there. So it was a strategic thing rather than a conviction.
So of these individuals that were there, and then later you speak about the other areas of business or the separate aspects of the business community, in some way did they represent foreign interests as well?
No, not at all. There were multinationals there, but very few. Munich Re was there, Munich Reinsurance. Toyota was there. But it was Toyota South Africa. Anglo-American was there, but they were still very much South African. Very few international.
So whoever came there with the push was, focus was South Africa.
And they were all South Africans. Okay. You know, even the guy from Munich Re was a South African, even though he worked for a Swiss company, but it was there. What we did do later on in the process, when it started looking like there might be a coming together of things, we did visit some of the diplomats and the ambassadors and also brief them, because we thought that they would then be able to tell the governments what was happening, because we thought this was a significant process. In the negotiations, although I was inside the negotiations, CBM carried on, and my colleague Colin Coleman then took over. We made sure that we, without breaking any protocol or breaking any confidences, that I briefed the business community every now and then. And that CBM then would also brief the embassies. And when we saw something on the horizon that may cause a friction in the negotiations, like for instance the whole question of the powers of provinces, we would talk to the American ambassador or the British ambassador or the German ambassador and say, look, we think this is a problem, perhaps you can just reach out and see whether you can help. But it's interesting that the South African peace and constitutional process never wanted, allowed or had foreign intervention. It's a very specific thing, I'm told by people who've studied outside, that although we were at some point deep in the depths of despair, we never said we will hand over and let an international group come and tell us what to do. There was that eminent persons group that came in the late 80s, but no one wanted to listen to them because they were not accepted by the government. They were also not accepted by the mass democratic movement. And then obviously the best known one of these abortive efforts was Chief Buthelezi of the IFP wanted a federal system. And the ANC and the National Party didn't. And so he looked for a way to get international mediation on the form of state. It's very interesting that outside the formal negotiations at CODESA, at Kempton Park, he and none other than Jacob Zuma made a deal that they would bring an international group led by Henry Kissinger and a number of others into the country. And it was done, I think, 3 weeks before the election in 1994. And I remember this very well because Cyril and Rolf called me in and said, what the hell have you done? I said, what are you talking about? And it was my colleague Colin Coleman who then helped Buthelezi and Zuma to bring Kissinger and others in. And I said, look, I didn't have any idea about this. And I remember what happened is Kissinger and his team landed, let's say, 8 o'clock on Jan Smuts Airport, it was still. And before they had their first media conference, Cyril and Rolf met them. And they said, thank you very much. You can, and they left that afternoon. So we resisted as a people any outside effort.
Okay, as a people, but what about as business?
Even as business, we didn't. I mean, in this case, we facilitated what two political figures, Frank Mlalose and Jacob Zuma, did, because they know each other. But it wasn't like we thought that they should do it, you know. So no, never that outside influence. And what was interesting, though, and that's another little tale, is that one of those members of Kissinger's team was a guy called a Kenyan called Washington Okumu. Big Christian. I met him at other levels, and he knew Buthelezi very well because he's also a committed Christian. And so before he left, he said, "I'll stay a day or two over." And he got into contact with Chief Minister Buthelezi, and he said, "My brother, I need to see you." And he said, "Well, I'm happy. I'll be at Lanseria Airport. My plane is leaving at 2 o'clock." And Okumu was late, so they took off. And about 40 minutes in the air, there was engine trouble.
So they had to come back.
And they had to come back. And when they came back and they landed, Okumu was there. And he said, "Let us talk." And he basically said to him, "Look, my brother, if you don't participate in these elections," because that's what Buthelezi said. He said, "Unless there's international mediation on this form of state, I will not participate." And the IFP and the Zulu Nation. And he said to him, "You know, you can win this one round, but you will be forced to flee to the hills of KwaZulu-Natal for the rest of your life. Don't do this." And Okumu, together with some other players, then was instrumental for Buthelezi saying, "Okay, I think it was 2 weeks before. Don't know whether someone else will know, but it's bad." And then we as business helped to with a plane of Anglo-American, and we flew to PE where Mandela was talking, and to Cape Town where FW de Klerk was, and eventually they decided, okay, we will put the last signature, you know, the IFP little signatory on the bottom of the page.
The ballot
so
pages.
they came in.
Yeah.
So that aborted international mediation at least had the result that it was a fairly inclusive election.
And that was important because KZN was a hot spot at that time also.
We would have had bloodshed.
Well, we did have some, but it would have been far more. Okay, when you started this, you spoke about the role of religion, because you said from your religion the apartheid policy was problematic. But I mean, there's a real contradiction in that also, in the sense that religion was used to divide or to basically and also justify apartheid, right?
Yeah.
And you realized that there was a problem with that. In terms of business and business players, etc., do you find that there was certainly a role in terms of race and language?
You mean by the business leaders?
Yes, white business individuals and Afrikaans and English business players.
No, look, I think in the CBM, the fact that there were very few Afrikaans business leaders was just a fact of the time. You know, they were more conservative, they were close to the National Party, they were perhaps more skeptical of the ANC. Later on, when we got more Afrikaans business leaders, it was about democratic and business principles, you know, economic principles. So I didn't see race or religion play a role there. There were Jewish business people there. They were Afrikaans, they were English, so Methodist, Presbyterian, they were probably Roman Catholic, there were probably some agnostics. There were no Muslims, or as far as I know, no Buddhists. But so it didn't play a role there. I think. So
they weren't coming with those particular interests, like a religious interest or a racial interest or whatever.